OpenAI could be approaching a turning point, not because of one bad headline, but because legal pressure, business competition, and concerns about safety, reliability, and trust are colliding at the same time. Each pressure might be manageable on its own. Together, they create something much bigger than a product cycle. They create a credibility cycle. OpenAI has spent years being treated as the company setting the pace for consumer AI. But when you set the pace, every delay can look like weakness, every launch can look risky, and every vague answer gives someone else an opportunity to define the story for you. The real question is whether OpenAI can keep accelerating while customers, governments, partners, competitors, and the public are all demanding different things. This entire situation traces back to one decision that made those competing demands impossible to ignore. The immediate pressure is not merely symbolic criticism. It carries potential operational, financial, legal, and strategic consequences for OpenAI. The underlying concern is not simply that artificial intelligence is powerful. It is that technology people believe is uncontrolled can quickly become a political and business liability. That distinction changes the story. Powerful technology can be celebrated. Technology perceived as uncontrolled creates resistance. The pressure is also coming from more than one direction. Institutions want stronger safeguards and clearer accountability. Business partners and customers want stability and predictability. Users want better tools, fewer restrictions, lower prices, and no surprises. Those demands do not fit neatly together. The sequence began with a decision, followed by a response and a wider external reaction. On the surface, that may sound like a normal problem for a fast-growing AI company. A release gets criticized, a policy changes, or a partner pushes back. Those things happen. What made this situation different was that it exposed a gap between two things OpenAI needs people to believe at the same time: that it is moving fast enough to remain competitive and that it is moving carefully enough to deserve their trust. Those ideas are not automatically opposites. They become opposites when the company cannot clearly explain how a difficult decision was made, who was accountable for it, and what changed afterward. That is why the scope of the damage matters more than the original event alone. The question is not only what went wrong, it is whether anyone outside OpenAI can determine how broad the impact was. When that scope remains unclear, it is important not to treat uncertainty as evidence of catastrophe. But uncertainty is exactly what allows speculation to take control of the narrative. OpenAI responded through the measures it made public. A pause, review, policy change, product change, executive statement, or external assessment can be responsible. It can show that a company recognized a problem and acted before it became worse. But a response can also create a second problem. If a company pauses after assuring people that everything is under control, the public naturally asks what changed. The answer has to be specific. What was reviewed? Who reviewed it? What standard must be met before progress continues? Will outsiders receive enough information to judge the outcome for themselves? A convincing response needs specificity, independent verification, and measurable corrective action. Without those elements, a safety response can look less like reassurance and more like an admission that the company was discovering its limits in public. That is not a claim about what OpenAI intended. It is the perception problem the company now has to manage. Even if the immediate issue is resolved, it has already strengthened a much wider argument about who gets to decide when frontier AI is safe enough. that debate is no longer confined to technical circles. It affects procurement decisions, classroom policies, workplace rules, investments, and the way governments think about national competitiveness. This is where a single controversy becomes a larger pressure system. Regulators want safeguards they can explain to voters. Companies want predictable conditions before building on a platform. Researchers want meaningful access to evaluate risks. Users want capable products without feeling like test cases. OpenAI wants enough room to keep building. Each of those goals can be reasonable, but they remain in direct tension. OpenAI is now being judged on more than model quality. It is being judged on governance, communication, pricing, reliability, partnerships, and whether its stated principles still match its behavior when the stakes rise. That leads to the contradiction, drawing the sharpest skepticism. OpenAI's public positions on safety and responsible development must be evaluated alongside its launches, partnerships, investments, infrastructure commitments, and other business decisions. Growth and safety are not inherently incompatible. A company can invest heavily while taking risk seriously. But when the public sees both messages at once, it asks a fair question: which priority wins when the two come into conflict? Trust is built during those conflict cases, not during the easy ones. If OpenAI supports stronger guardrails, the important questions are what those guardrails require, who enforces them, whether they apply equally to OpenAI and its competitors, and what happens when a company fails to meet the standard. If OpenAI supports rapid deployment, the questions become how it measures harm, how quickly it can reverse course, and whether affected people have a meaningful way to challenge bad outcomes. Those are not anti-AI questions. They help determine whether AI becomes normal infrastructure or remains something people feel is being imposed on them. There is also a broader industry problem. AI capabilities are spreading well beyond one company. That means OpenAI cannot solve every problem alone, but it also cannot avoid responsibility by pointing to what everyone else is doing. The standard is changing. Publishing a policy or maintaining a safety team is no longer enough. The public increasingly wants to know whether protections work under pressure, whether independent researchers can test them, and whether companies disclose failures quickly enough for that disclosure to matter. That is a much harder standard, but it is the standard most likely to endure as these systems become more capable and more deeply embedded in daily life. At the same time, the physical and financial expansion of AI continues. Investment in infrastructure, computing capacity, data centers, energy, chips, and partnerships is making the technology more consequential before society has settled on the rules for handling it. That does not mean disaster is inevitable. It means the margin for vague promises is shrinking, especially as slowing down becomes more difficult and expensive. For OpenAI, the next test is not simply whether it can release a better model. It is whether the company can demonstrate that greater capability comes with clearer accountability. For governments, the test is whether they can protect people without freezing the field in place. For everyone building with these tools, the test is whether they can resist confusing, impressive demonstrations with proven reliability. OpenAI is under serious pressure, but the deeper story is not that the company is suddenly doomed. It is that artificial intelligence has reached a stage where speed alone is no longer a complete strategy. The next major decision will reveal whether OpenAI can satisfy the institutions demanding accountability without sacrificing the momentum it considers essential. Watch for the specificity of its response, the presence or absence of independent verification, and whether any corrective action can be measured. Those signals will show whether OpenAI is regaining control of the narrative or whether the narrative has become bigger than the company. If you found this analysis useful, please like the video and subscribe.